Queen Elizabeth I, the mighty Gloriana, ruled England with incredible strength and resilience for 44 turbulent and stormy years. But she was more than just a monarch. She was like a force of nature. Throughout her reign, she stood unwavering against some of the most powerful rulers of her time, including the formidable Philip II of Spain. Elizabeth famously crushed the mightiest naval assault Europe had ever seen, the Spanish Armada, and survived countless deadly plots and conspiracies that would have shattered weaker leaders. She was the last bright star of the Tudor dynasty, the legendary Virgin Queen who wielded her power like a sharp sword, forever altering the destiny of England. Yet despite all her authority and influence, Elizabeth harbored a secret fear, one greater than any political threat or assassination attempt. She feared what would happen to her body after death. Centuries later, when her tomb was finally opened, it would reveal a terrifying secret that still chills the blood to this day. Every day of Elizabeth's reign was like walking a tightrope stretched over a chasm of deadly danger. Enemies lurked everywhere, Catholic fanatics who branded her a heretic deserving of death, foreign rulers conspiring to topple her, and traitors even within her own family. The greatest threat was her own cousin, the beautiful but ill-fated Mary, Queen of Scots. When Elizabeth ultimately signed Mary's death warrant, the decision haunted her for the rest of her life. Beneath her famously powdered face, behind the image of unyielding strength, Elizabeth was a woman tormented by fears few could truly imagine, especially the horrifying fate that might await her corpse. In the brutal 1500s, embalming was not the gentle preservation process we think of today. Instead, it was a harsh, violent ordeal. Imagine cold stone slabs, sharp knives cutting through sacred flesh, organs ripped out without mercy, and the hollowed bodies stuffed with pungent spices, a desperate attempt to fight off the inevitable stench and decay that claimed every corpse. Elizabeth was terrified of this. She begged her doctors to leave her body untouched and whole, wishing to meet God as she had lived, pure, untouched, and still a queen. Even in death, but once her life ended, her mortal power vanished with her final breath on March 24, 1603. Elizabeth died, her iron will no longer able to protect her. Her body was laid on the cold embalmer's table, where royal surgeons treated her not with kindness, but with grim necessity. Their sharp blades cut deep into her flesh, tearing open her chest. Her heart, the very symbol of her courage, was removed, along with her liver, intestines, and every vital organ. The empty spaces were packed tightly with cloves, myrrh, cinnamon, and rare herbs. This was not a tribute to the Queen's majesty, but a desperate attempt to delay the rapid decay of her body. The embalmers knew a terrifying truth. Without this gruesome treatment, her corpse could swell like a balloon, gases building up inside her coffin like a ticking bomb. If the coffin burst during her grand funeral procession, as had happened to others before her, the Queen's rotting insides could explode before the eyes of her mourners, turning a day of reverence into unspeakable horror. The embalming was no honor. It was a cruel delay of death's inevitable claim. After this horrific work was done, Elizabeth's body was wrapped in heavy crimson velvet, embroidered with Tudor roses, and placed inside a thick lead-lined coffin. Her final journey began. The royal barge carried her slowly down England's rivers, while thousands of grief-stricken people lined the shores. Yet, they were mourning a lie. The people walking beside her coffin were secretly terrified. Despite all the embalming, the gases of decay still found ways to escape, slipping through tiny cracks in the lead. A sickly, sweet smell of death clung to the royal barge, an invisible, terrible companion riding silently alongside the Virgin Queen. If the coffin had fully broken open, England would have witnessed an unspeakable horror. Their beloved Gloriana, exploding in a shower of rotting flesh on the sacred river. But, for the moment, the lead coffin barely held at Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth was laid to rest in a grand tomb, but even here, her story was far from over. Nearly 300 years later, in the late 1800s, driven by Victorian curiosity and a thirst for history, Dean Arthur Stanley received permission from Queen Victoria herself to open the sealed tombs beneath the abbey. After receiving Queen Victoria's solemn permission to open the sealed tombs hidden deep beneath Westminster Abbey, Dean Arthur Stanley approached the task with a mixture of awe and dread. Clutching a lantern that trembled in his hand, he descended carefully into the pitch underground chambers. The air was chilling, cold, thick, and oppressive, heavy with the unmistakable stench of centuries-old decay that seemed to seep from the very stones around him. As Stanley stepped further into the darkness, he entered a shadowy world where England's greatest queen had long been forgotten, her once glorious memory obscured by time and rot. What he found was more horrifying than any story or rumor had suggested. Elizabeth's coffin, once a majestic symbol of royal power, was now crumbling and decayed beyond recognition. The wooden outer layer had completely rotted away, reduced to nothing but dusty fragments. The once luxurious crimson velvet that had adorned her resting place was now a fragile, brittle scrap, delicate remnants clinging weakly to what remained of the coffin. Even the lead shell, her last and most precious protection against decay, was bent, twisted, and sagging grotesquely under the weight of what lay inside. The stench was unbearable. A damp, ancient smell saturated with the sickening odor of long-dead flesh. After centuries, the air still reeked of her decaying body, as if death itself had chosen this tomb as a permanent haunt. On the broken lid, Stanley could barely make out the faint worn carving of the Tudor rose, the emblem of Elizabeth's lineage, and the barely visible letters ER, standing for Elizabeth, Regina. These were faint whispers of her former glory, etched in stone amidst the overwhelming rot. But the horrors did not end there. Resting above Elizabeth's shattered coffin were the crumbling remains of her half-sister and lifelong rival, Mary I, infamously known as Bloody Mary. In life, the two queens had torn England apart with religious wars, hatred, and bitter enmity. In death, they now shared the same airless dark vault, locked together forever in a silent, grim embrace. Stanley stood frozen, surrounded by the physical remains of centuries of bitter feud and slow, unrelenting decay. The silence was heavy, not empty, but weighted with the oppressive presence of time and death. There was no sound, no company but the grim remains of two rival queens trapped together beneath the stone, in their final, haunting embrace of rot. Unlike many others buried long ago who had simply turned to dust, Elizabeth's violent embalming had only delayed the inevitable. The lead coffin, once designed to shield her from decay, was now grotesquely swollen and bulging, strained by gases trapped inside. The oak that had once encased her was long gone, and the velvet that had clothed her had vanished, leaving behind only fragments of defiance, the faint Tudor rose, and her initials. Beneath the ruined metal and decayed finery lay the brutal truth that no amount of power or royalty could alter. Her body was reduced to broken bones, rotted flesh, and the final remnants of nature's ruthless reclamation. In that moment, Arthur Stanley did what time itself had not dared to do for over 3 centuries. He opened Elizabeth I's stinking coffin. What he saw was not the radiant virgin queen immortalized in legend, but a gruesome reminder of death's unyielding power, a sobering vision of decay. The untouchable Gloriana, once the commander of kings and nations, was now nothing more than collapsing bones, disintegrating velvet, rotting wood, and twisted, poisoned lead. The cold air inside the tomb carried one final royal scent, the slow, unstoppable smell of centuries of rot. Today, tourists stroll across the gleaming floors of Westminster Abbey, completely unaware of the horror lurking beneath their feet. They admire statues, grand monuments, and stained glass windows, blissfully ignorant of the dreadful secret hidden below. They breathe fresh, clean air, free from the poisonous gases that once seeped up from the tomb. They hear the angelic voices of choirs, not the suffocating silence of that black vault. Elizabeth's grand tomb remains a towering symbol of power and majesty, but beneath its peaceful surface lies a far uglier truth, a rotting coffin, misshapen and dangerously fragile. It is an everlasting, chilling message, written not in stone, but in decay. No crown, no empire, no legend can shield even the greatest ruler from death's claim. Flesh rots, lead bends, velvet crumbles to dust. Queens and paupers alike are devoured by time. Even the grandest empires become nothing more than a feast for worms. Elizabeth, who once ruled oceans and empires, who outmaneuvered assassins and kings, now lies in a silent, decaying vault, her body reduced to fragile remnants in crumbling velvet. Her legacy endures in books, portraits, and legend. But the flesh that bore the weight of a crown has long since surrendered to the unrelenting forces of nature. Time is the final monarch, and none, not even the Virgin Queen, can escape its reign.